Welcome back, guys. As you probably already know, being able to manage and update our applications architectures, even as our projects mature, is one of the many benefits that Intense Architect brings us as developers. So, in this workshop, I'm going to show you guys at a high level how we can manage our architectures, and I'm going to take you through a simple example or two so that you can follow along. Right, so let's jump right in. I'm going to start off by right clicking on the application, and I'm going to select Manage Modules. This is going to take us to the Modules Management tab. And the first sub-tab, if you want to think of it like that, that it's going to open is the template. And this is essentially the architecture template that we first selected when we created this application, but very much through the view of what components are installed and what other components are available that have essentially known compatibility. And we can also see here in between all of our installed modules, we can see how many extensions, if there is a little green badge over here with the number of extensions that are installed, we can see how many extensions are also available under this particular component. So if we click on the entity framework component, we can see that the core module here is in fact our entity framework core module. So this is the configurations, the DB context, all of those patterns that are coming in. And then we have a whole bunch of other options that are available to us here, like, for example, soft deletes and temporal tables, data masking, bulk operations, second level caching, and so on and so forth. We've also got the repository pattern already installed. And if we want to remove that, we can uninstall it over here. We can also install these extensions by just simply clicking on this little icon and button over here. Right. So we can go and move around our architecture from this view and we can see what extensions are available. So this also serves as a way for teams to discover what options are available. And what we've done is we've also set it up so that each of the modules will give you an icon showing you how to get to the documentation. So if you click on this question mark icon under a particular module, it will take you directly to the documentation for that module too. So it's a way to understand when these components, when these extensions should come in. Same, for example, in value objects, there's the option of there to go view the documentation. So it's really here for you guys to discover what the capabilities are in Intent Architect, specifically around what modules are available, also to understand when they are appropriate and when you can use them for your projects. Right. So as part of the example today, let's say that we actually want to install the value objects pattern. So how do we do this? I'm sure it's quite intuitive. You just click on the install option over here, and this will quite simply install the component for us, the module itself. And now that that's installed, you'll see that the software factory is already kicked off again, has run, and it has a change for us that is pending. Now, the one thing I could just mention that is quite important is before you go and make architectural changes to your project, it is absolutely recommended that you do not do this in the middle of building out a use case. You definitely don't want to update modules either in the middle of a use case. You also want to make sure that you probably have everything checked into version control so that it all is all clear and you don't lose any work that you've done. So, of course, common sense and best practices in terms of your process should prevail. You probably don't want to be making these changes also during stabilization phases of your project. Typically speaking, those kinds of things should be avoided, right? Rather stabilize, go live, and then when you move back into active development, then come back to your architecture, make updates to the modules, as we'll talk about in a minute, or change your components or shift things around as and when you need to, right? This is not something, by the way, that you need to do very, very often in your projects, but it is always available because there's always changing requirements on applications. We know this over years, large core business applications do need to be shifted around, and we can make these changes 6 months into the project, even 6 years into the project, right? So we have this control throughout the lifetime of our projects, which is very, very key. Now, the next thing I could just show you guys here is that now that we've installed the value objects pattern, our domain designer is flashing. It's simply flashing because the metadata for this particular designer has changed, the settings at least. And so if we right click, we could say reload and we can right click on the background now. And there we can see our value object option, or the option to create new value objects, is now available to us, right? So when we install that module, it did actually change what is available to us inside of Intent Architect. Inside of our domain designer, as an example, we now have this value object option. Okay, so that's the first aspect. The architecture template is your first touch point when dealing with your architecture, particularly around changing the architecture downstream. All right. The next option here is browse. Browse is really a place for us to find any module, even modules that could be incompatible with our architecture. Of course, it's not really recommended to install modules that would not work with your current architecture, but there are cases, edge cases typically, where you'd want to do things like that. If you know how to configure it correctly inside of your Visual Studio Designer, you could do things like installing a Azure functions alongside ASP.NET Core and things like that, right? But if we want to search, we can search for, if we want to search for ASP.NET Core options, these will still be compatible because that is the core hosting technology that we're running. And we can find all the options here, even ones that aren't necessarily listed inside of our architecture template. Next, we can go to installed. If we go to installed, this will show us the de facto list of modules that are actually installed for this particular application. So this is what is defining our architecture quite fundamentally. So all of these modules together are creating our designer experience inside of Intent Architect, as well as what patterns are being automated when it comes to our code. And so this is where we can see each of those individual patterns and technologies that those patterns are bringing in, all visible for us right here. Now, if we select any particular module, you'll see that the module itself has what version is installed, what versions are available, and we can upgrade, downgrade, uninstall different modules as and when we need to. We can also view the release notes, which I'll talk about in a minute, and we can see a lot of the details about what supported client this is part of, what dependencies it brings in, and there's some more advanced options of here, like turning on and off templates or changing some of those settings, which we're not going to cover right now. Those are more advanced options, which we'll cover in later workshops and in documentation. All right, so from an install perspective, this just gives us the view. You'll also notice that we've got some updates that are available. We can select these updates, but a really great way for us to see the updates is by selecting the Updates tab, and this is going to load all updates for all of the modules that we've got installed for this application. Now, the one thing that is just worth mentioning over here is that you'll see that there are different colors to these upgrade icons. Green typically indicates that these are patch releases, right? And patch releases are generally very safe. You can upgrade them without really having to check anything. And we recommend that you update all of your patch releases as and when you see them. The next color that you'll notice here is blue. Blue is indicating that these are minor releases. This will typically introduce changes to the patterns, which may have consequences, but very, very, very unlikely for your application. So they're generally considered safe, but there could be consequences. So perhaps you'd want to check these. And this also indicates that potentially there's new features that have been installed here. And so if we select, for example, the swashbuckle, and we want to take a look at the release notes, we can click on the release notes here, and it'll show us all of the different changes that have come in, right? So here we can see why this is a minor release. There's some information here about what this minor release entails, and we can see all of the different releases in the past that have come in and what has happened when along the way. Now, the one color that we're not seeing over here is the orange or yellow option. Now, that is when there is a major release. And when there's a major release that's come in for a particular module, it means that there is some kind of a breaking change. And those you will definitely want to inspect in the release notes. The release notes will also document or point you to documentation on how you can make the migration if there are any migration changes that you need to do in order to move on to the latest version of that module. But as a simple rule of thumb, the green options over here, you can update without really having to worry about them, without having to check anything. You could do the blue ones. We would recommend checking them, but it's not really necessary most of the time. And the yellow ones, which are major releases, absolutely check them, see if you're ready for them, and certainly do not make those changes without during your stabilization phases or without the runway required to make the upgrade if you need to make that upgrade. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the updates at a high level. Now, one thing we can do is if we want to bring in all of these updates, we can just select all of the modules over here and we can click on the update option over there. We can select these each individually if we want. There are the options to update just this particular module on the right over here. But if we want to do them all in one go, we can just say select all and we can select update. And this is going to update our entire application, right, with all of the different modules that were available. Software Factory is going to run as soon as that's happened. And right now it's bringing up that there are 5 changes that I would like to bring in. And here we can see that there is the swashbuckle configuration. So this was really what that release note was pointing to, was some of the information about what this upgrade does entail and the reason for it being there. And then you can see that there's lots of updates that are coming in, which are things like NuGet package updates. Now, when our team does releases, we of course always check the latest NuGet packages on average, it's about a 2-week cadence that you guys can expect new module updates to be coming in, at least from our team. And those module updates will include things like NuGet packages, but just keep in mind that these are updates to the pattern, which may include NuGet package updates, right? NuGet package updates are things that you guys can make independently of Intent Architect. That's not really something we're going to get into as part of this workshop, but it is just worth keeping in mind. If we're happy with all of these changes, we can go ahead and say apply changes. we have no further updates, and we can just circle back to our template over here. By the way, you did see that there were lots and lots of updates that came in and very few changes to the code. Those could oftentimes be because some of those updates may be bug fixes that are in very in edge cases and things like that. And so we wouldn't necessarily have seen those unless we had those edge cases coming in. And some of those could also indicate advanced feature enhancements or bug fixes that are coming into the designer. So not everything is going to translate to code. Some of them will translate to bug fixes and enhancements in the designers and in the intent architect ecosystem itself. Okay, guys, I hope that this video gives you a good feeling for how we can manage our architectures. We could do this over the lifetime of the project at any stage. And please give us a comment below. And if you guys enjoyed it, let us know too. Until the next one, wishing you all the best. Cheers.